The tickets have been punched, and now we're only days away from the U.S. men's national team kicking off against Wales in the opening match of the 2022 World Cup group stage.
And it's a goal for the United States! Le va a pegar al arco, busca el pelotazo,
Simplistic, you're listening to Stars and Stripes.
That's right, guys. Like Chaz mentioned, the World Cup is only days away. This is something that I know I've been looking forward to for 8 years. I know a lot of Americans have been doing the same.
We all pumped up, baby. We pumped.
Yeah, of course.
And welcome back too, man. It's been a while since you've been on here.
I was about to say it's been a while since we've been together on a show. I'm over here in the little tiki room. Contrary to what it looks like, I am in the States. I know it's just my bedroom for the time being, but I'm excited. I know Chaz and I are already planning where we're going to be going to watch these games. Hopefully, we'll be updating you guys on socials as to where we'll be and where we'll be watching the games. That'll be some crazy parties, getting together, getting the United States men's national team community together. It's going to be a great time, man.
Dude, the atmosphere, electricity. We can't be in Qatar because of our schedules and the whole thing that it costs a hell of a lot of money to find a hotel room in Qatar right now. Rumor has it things are going for about multiple grand per night for one of those hotel rooms. I don't know how the hell that city's going to be able to. I saw a stat today. 2.9 billion people live in Qatar. They're expecting 1.5 million people to be visiting in the next month. I don't know how the hell the infrastructure is going to be able to support it, but nonetheless, I am so excited. The team is out, and why don't we just go through those names real quick before we get into all the busts and the snubs and all that stuff. So starting off, we'll just go in number order. Matt Turner, the goalkeeper, Serginho Dest, Walker Zimmerman, Tyler Adams, Anthony Robinson, Yunus Musa, Giovanni Reyna, Weston McKennie, Jesus Ferreira, Christian Pulisic, Brendan Aronson, Ethan Horvath, Tim Ream, Luca Della Torre, Aaron Long, Jordan Morris, Christian Roldan, Shaq Moore, Haji Wright, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tim Weah, DeAndre Yedlin, Kellen Acosta, Josh Sargent, Sean Johnson, and Joe Scally.
Right off the bat, I want to ask you, just before we get into what we plan for our reactions, one name you just read, what is the first name that stands out to you, whether good or bad?
Haji Wright. And I think that's the one that will stand out to all U.S. soccer fans. And I think we were all thinking it was going to be between Pepe and Pifok. And that's kind of how it was being built up. Who's going to be the big striker? And then out of nowhere, Haji Wright comes into this conversation. When I recorded the podcast episode and the episode we put up on YouTube for predicting who the players are going to be, I had Haji Wright's name there, but I just blew him out of the water. Just kind of was like, oh, he hasn't played enough with the national team. He didn't do well in those two camps that he came into. Gregg Berhalter ripped him a new one. He was one of the last people that I was expecting to be on the plane to Qatar. I didn't even think he was really on the bubble. I thought he was pretty decently far on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. It's definitely a weird one, and it's at the same time you got to think. I mean, for how many years have we been talking about this striker conversation, saying like who's gonna be our number 9, who's gonna be our front man in Qatar, and it looks like it went all the way up to the wire, and it looks like even maybe Gregg Berhalter didn't even know at times, and he just had to make a decision. But that being said, all these guys that you mentioned have been on great form. So you can't take away anything from, Pifok, from Pepe, and say, oh, Haji's been in better form right now. Because no, I mean, even since the squad's been announced, Pepe's been on a mad one. He's been on a tear, man. He's doing great.
Scored another goal.
Exactly. And
Union Berlin for Pifok, they're still on top of the title. But to be fair to Haji, he has 9 goals in 12 games. So he has been scoring a lot of goals for over in that Turkish league. I'm not even going to pretend to try and announce that. And Antalyaspor, and one of those hard clubs to pronounce the name over in Turkey. But this reminds me of Herculez Gomez getting selected to the World Cup back in 2010. Only a couple caps before, hadn't really been around the national team, but he was playing well, and Bob Bradley took him. And I think that's kind of what happened with Haji right here.
Yeah, and I think what makes this pick so interesting too is we have squad players. It's a 26-man squad, and only 11 start the game. There's plenty of squad players in here. You got Shaq Moore, you got Joe Staley, whatever. These guys may not see that much of the field, but they're there for cover. The thing with someone like Haji Wright is he is going to be called upon at times. There's going to be scenarios in this tournament where things might not go our way, and we're going to have to look at our bench for attacking options. And that is where Haji Wright is going to be the guy that we're going to turn to. So Gregg fully made this decision knowing that Haji Wright is going to be that option off the bench. And for me, I mean, it may not have been my first pick, but it's who Gregg is going with. And the community sure as hell has to hope that Gregg is not wrong on this one, because you cannot be making these, loose-minded decisions for the World Cup. I mean, it has to pay off by choosing Haji Wright. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like Haji Wright is meant to score at this tournament, given all the things that are going on right now. And like you said, he's going to play a role in this tournament. That's without a doubt. If the U.S. are trailing a match and they needed just a change of pace to throw a big guy up there to try and whip crosses in, he's going to be there. He's that target man. He's got pace. He's big. He's fast. He's strong. And he's going to be the guy that you need to whip those crosses into and try and catch up in a game, maybe steal a goal here and there to keep going, maybe to, whether that's trying to finish off the thing and qualify for the next round, or if it's in a knockout stage, down a goal, you need to bring this thing to extra time. Haji Wright's going to be the guy. But when you talk about Jordan Pefok and Ricardo Pepi, both of them should be absolutely livid and feel like they got snubbed, because to be fair to both of them, I feel like they did enough to be in this squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to take away from Haji, because he's in good form and he's a great player, very similar to Pefok in that regard. He's going to offer us a big guy up top to whip balls into and poach some goals, whatever. But I think for me, since they're all on form, since they're all doing great with their clubs, for me, I just got to look to their past with the national team, and that is what makes the difference. I mean, even in the goalkeeper conversation, if we want to turn to that now, what makes the difference for me in that talk is the history with the national team, because at a tournament like this, regardless of if you're playing or if you just sit the bench for all 3 games and you're out, you go back home, whatever, the chemistry and the relationship that you bring over to a country and over to a big tournament like this is a huge part in the dynamic that you're going to have in your training camps, and you got to take that into consideration with the squad when you're building a squad as a whole. So for me, like Pefok, Pepi, they've been around this team, they've won trophies with this team, and now they're not coming to the tournament.
They both played a key role in winning trophies. When you think of Jordan Pefok and the Nations League, and then you think Ricardo Pepi saved Gregg Berhalter's job during qualifying. But one last point on Haji Wright and the chemistry. He did grow up playing with many of these players within the youth national teams. That's not something I really thought about or considered before his selection. So many of the players he actually does have familiarity with. He's been playing with them since they were both, and all of them at such a young age, going up through the U17s, U18s. He and Christian Pulisic, both very close friends. So that's just one example. So it's not like he hasn't played with many of these players. But to your point, he's only played in 3 games for the U.S. senior team. That's, considering when you're looking at the other options, it's a bit out of left field. But got to get behind the boys. And you mentioned the goalkeeper position. No Zach Steffen. I think that came as a surprise to many people. Yes, it kind of got leaked on Twitter beforehand, but we almost didn't believe it, because we're like, Zach Steffen, okay, maybe he's not the number one, because the whole conversation has been Steffen or Turner. Who's the number one? Well, Matt Turner's definitely the number one now.
Yeah, I think I texted you right before we were talking about the news, and I said, oh, I don't buy it for a second. I think it's whatever. Just paper talk, maybe speculation. And then the squads came out, sure enough. Sean Johnson is the guy that's coming in, even Ethan Horvath coming in. And look, man, this one's a tough one for me, because like I mentioned, even if you're not playing, Zach Steffen has been one of these players that's been like the heart and soul of the team. He's been part of this core squad for so long. I mean, you put Zach Steffen's name up there when you talk about Weston McKennie, when you talk about Christian Pulisic. And regardless of if he's in form or not, I mean, we've seen a Michael Bradley who's out of form go to these type of tournaments. But the fact of the
I don't know if we
matter
want to
is-
compare Zach Steffen to Michael Bradley. Michael Bradley,
fact of the
to
matter
all
is-
due respect to Michael Bradley, I mean, I know he's been, the end of some jokes recently, but he is arguably one of the best U.S. men's national team midfielders of all time. So you go back to your point, but we got to put some respect on Mr. Bradley's name there.
Of course. What the point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes in a tournament, and especially in the goalkeeper position, you're not going to run through 3 goalkeepers in a tournament. Very unlikely. Knock on wood, actually, because who knows what'll happen. But look, if you could bring a player like Zach Steffen, who, like I said, has won trophies, who has been core player of this team, he's shown his commitment to this team, and he's worked hard for this team. I don't understand what the decision is in not taking him, especially for someone like Sean Johnson, who has not been around as often as he has.
Well, Sean Johnson's been in the squad for many of these tournament games and friendlies and qualifiers. He just hasn't played. And now I don't think there's any world that Zach Steffen is not one of the 3 best goalkeepers in the U.S. player pool right now. Where my mind goes to is almost like the NFL quarterback debacle. There's that saying where if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. I think this could just be a chemistry thing, and Gregg didn't want to divide the squad in being, should it be Turner or should it be Steffen? And he's like, Matt Turner's our guy. I don't want there to be any competition. There's no doubt that Matt Turner is the guy. He's going to be our number 1. He's the goalie. If Zach Steffen's there, you could have thoughts being like, if Matt Turner makes a mistake, we got Zach Steffen back there, man. Like, he was the one that was there for most of qualifying. Like, why don't we throw him in? Like, why is he not in the goal?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't buy all that whatever NFL analogy, because the fact of the matter is, you look at the big countries, you look at Spain, you look at France, they're bringing their best players. That's at the end of the day, they bring their best players because this is what they build up to for 4 years. So you if you want to be a big team, if you want to be a team with a good squad depth, you have to be willing to have those chemistry issues, because sometimes there's going to be big players that butt heads, and one of them is going to play, the other doesn't, and that's just problems that teams with good squad depth have. It's a good problem to have. So I don't think that should have been something on Gregg's mind, if anything, but this is the reality.
Absolutely. Another couple guys that maybe a surprise inclusion here, Christian Roldan. I think many of us thought he would be on the outside looking in, but we saw Gregg Berhalter err in a little bit of be more conservative in his selection by taking a guy like Christian Roldan over a Malik Tillman.
Yeah, and that one I think just has to come from the Weston McKennie issues that he's been having in recent weeks. It looks like he's healthy now. He's out there training with the squad and whatnot, but we have Kellen Acosta, but it's just a matter of having that depth in midfield, and that person that could play a wide variety of roles in the midfield, kind of just a
jack of all trades.
Exactly. Yeah. And somebody who's reliable. And we've seen Christian Roldan be a reliable guy in the MLS for a long time. And I think it's somebody just like Kellen Acosta, somebody that you can look back at and say, this is a guy that'll at the bare minimum do his job.
I think that's pretty much a very fair way to sum up Christian Roldan. He's almost like the U.S. version of James Milner. And that's no disrespect to him at all. James Milner has gone out and had a great career, played for England. Obviously, I'm a Liverpool fan. Love me some James Milner. And then the biggest happy surprise, I think, for both of us, Tim Ream. I think you and I, when we talked before that episode, and I displayed it on that episode doing the squad prediction, I didn't think Tim Ream was going to make it in. I thought it was kind of going to be a John Brooks, almost like, oh, we know what he's worth, or, oh, he's too old. He doesn't have the pace to do it. But he's been playing very, very well over in the Premier League, and he earned that spot on the plane. And I think that professionalism, that experience, yes, he hasn't played in the World Cup. DeAndre Edlin's the only guy in the squad that has, and he was a kid back then. But I think Tim Ream being on the plane to Qatar, whether he plays or not, is going to be huge and is a very good thing for this team.
Yeah, I think absolutely that this is one of my favorite picks from Berhalter, because it just goes to show what, putting your head down, hard work can result in. Tim Ream is not somebody that, if you asked me a year ago, that I would have predicted to be a part of this squad, just because of purely his age. But he's even showing people like, Pep Guardiola up. I mean, you see Fulham play Manchester City. Pep talks to him after saying, hey, if you were 25 instead of 35, you'd be playing for me. And
he said 24 instead of 34, you'd be playing for me. And Tim Ream responded in an absolute G way, I'm 35.
Yeah, exactly. And that just goes to show how good a form Tim Ream has been in, because I mean, even United just played them last week, and I got a closer eye on him then, and he's just really solidified himself as a top Premier League defender, and that's not easy to do when you're 35, especially at a team like Fulham.
Yeah, and one of the points that Gregg Berhalter made and kind of touched on briefly in his post squad release press conferences was the familiarity with a lot of the opponents. So guys like Tim Ream, Anthony Robinson, he mentioned it with Josh Sargent. They've played against a lot of the players that we're going to see in that group stage between England and Wales, whether it be in the Premier League or in the Championship. So that familiarity against some of the opposition could be a big reason why Greg maybe have leaned their way, especially when it comes to the injuries to guys like Miles Robinson, who we knew was going to be out, and Chris Richards, who was a late drop because of his fitness issues with Crystal Palace. Two guys that probably would have been in the squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, I mean, I think we have good depth in defense. Obviously, like you mentioned, we have some players that didn't make it, but I feel confident that the players that we have can at least do the jobs against the teams like Wales, against the teams like Iran, England, when we get tested more so. Like you said, these guys have played against a lot of those players, so I'm sure that'll come in handy. But with that, I want to ask you, Jazz, what are some other of our weaknesses in this squad? I mean, we talked about, the midfield too, but are we missing anything?
I think the only thing with the midfield is the fitness question marks around Weston McKennie. And that could be why we saw Brendan Aronson listed as a midfielder, which kind of came as a little bit of a surprise. You would have expected him to be listed as a winger or a forward, like many of the other players that have played similar positions and where he's played before for the US. But if Weston McKennie isn't fit for that Wales game, especially, I think it's very realistic that we could see a midfield three of Musa, Tyler Adams, and Brendan Aronson. He's a very versatile player. But in terms of weaknesses, I know we were just praising Tim Ream, but that left-sided center half. Tim Ream hasn't played for the national team for a long time. We don't know exactly what his chemistry is like with Walker Zimmerman. He hasn't played many matches with him. That's one of the biggest question marks. And the other biggest question mark, it's been the biggest question mark throughout qualifying, number 9. Can Jesus Ferreira score the goals? Can Josh Sargent score the goals? Can Haji Wright finish the ball in front of the net if given to him?
Yeah, I have to agree with you then. I'm really nervous to see who is going to be that starting man against Wales on Monday, because that starting position is going to come with a tremendous amount of weight, because we have expectations going into this tournament that our attack is lacking, its finishing touch. Our attack, we can't capitalize on possession. So personally, I don't see Ferreira as being that guy. And frankly, I also don't see Sargent as being that guy. So that's why when we talk about Wright, I think he's going to play a big role. And even then, it's still weakness as our number 9. And I just really don't know where the goals are going to come from. If they're not coming from Aronson, Weah, or Pulisic, who's going to be finishing them?
Well, those guys are the names right there. The strength of this team is in wide areas, both from the wingers and from the fullbacks. Center back depth also could be a little bit of an issue. Only 4 center backs on this roster. You would have expected probably 5. But both sides of the wing back roles and from the forwards. I mean, think about the options that we have on the right and the left wing. Christian Pulisic obviously is going to be the guy on the left, But we have Brendan Aronson, Timothy Weah, Giovanni Reyna. Then you have a guy like Jordan Morris who offers a change of pace. He's a pretty darn good player too, that you can add his name into the hat. That's a big time strength. All those guys can contribute to goals, both assisting and finishing. And then when you look at the attacking options from the wingback roles, obviously we know what Serginho Dest is. We saw that goal he scored against Costa Rica. We know how attack-minded he is. Anthony Robinson has been an absolute rock for this national team since he's established himself as that premier left back. Then you got DeAndre Yedlin with the pace and his experience, being the old head, which is crazy to think that he is. And then a guy like a wild card like Joe Scally, who've been playing so well this season and last since breaking through at Borussia Mönchengladbach. The wide areas are where this team stacks up against many of the best teams in this tournament in terms of depth.
Yeah, and at the same time, the versatility in these wide players to play different roles in the team, depending on the opponent we're going against, depending on what the status of the game is. Obviously, Aronson, Pulisic, even Weah, Giovanni Reyna. These are guys who are comfortable in switching things up, playing different systems, and I think that also is one of our big strengths is our ability to work on the cuff or roll with the punches, depending on what is asked of our front men. We can switch things up. We can swap wings. All of these guys are very capable of playing anywhere in the front four, which is a good thing to have.
That's all we got for you on this edition of Stars and Strikes.
This is the place to be for anything and everything USMNT. Check out our other content on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Make sure to hit like and subscribe, and also hit us up on social media as we follow the boys on their quest for glory in Qatar. We will see you real soon.